In 1891, Nikola Tesla made a statement that physicists still cannot explain. If you only knew the magnificence of the 3, 6, and 9, then you would have the key to the universe. He spent the rest of his life obsessed with these numbers. He would not enter a building unless he could walk around it 3 times. He demanded hotel rooms divisible by 3. He used 18 napkins at dinner, always 18, which reduces to 9. His colleagues called it madness. It was not madness. He had discovered something that appears in a fragment of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene that did not survive in the complete texts. Only fragments remain, and these fragments describe Jesus' teaching about what he called the pattern of return, the mathematical sequence woven into creation itself that, when understood, reveals the path back to the monad. The fragment says, he drew 3 circles in the sand, then 6 points between them, then 9 lines connecting all, and he said, this is how the Father structured light into matter. 3 descending, 6 holding the pattern, 9 as the return path. Learn this sequence, and you hold the mathematics of liberation. Tesla did not discover this pattern. He remembered it, and the moment he remembered, his entire life became oriented around proving what he could not say out loud. That 369 is not mathematics in the conventional sense, but the monad's signature encoded into physical reality itself. This is not metaphor. This is not spiritual poetry meant to inspire contemplation. This is a literal, testable, repeatable, cognitive technology that has been preserved in fragments across multiple independent sources and can be verified through direct practice. The institutional mechanisms that shaped Christian orthodoxy knew this was literal instruction, which is precisely why these texts were suppressed, why the Gospel of Mary exists only in fragmentary form, why the techniques were excluded from canonical scripture. In the next 2 hours, you will learn the actual practice that connects Tesla's obsession, Jesus' teaching in the sand, and the Pythagorean understanding of the monad's mathematics. You will learn the specific breathing pattern: 3 counts inhale, 6 counts hold, 9 counts exhale. You will understand the body positions that align your physical form with what the fragment calls the ascending spiral. You will learn the cognitive frame that must be held simultaneously, what the Gospel of Thomas calls making the inner like the outer, and why this particular combination creates measurable changes in your nervous system that you can verify yourself. By the end of this investigation, you will be able to test 3 specific outcomes. First, within 7 days of consistent practice, you will notice changes in your sleep architecture, particularly increased coherence in heart rate variability during deep sleep phases. Second, you will experience a dissolution of binary thinking patterns in daily decision-making, replaced by what practitioners describe as seeing from the center. Third, you will begin recognizing this same 3 to 6 9 pattern operating in systems you previously thought were unrelated, from the structure of benzene rings to the harmonic ratios in Gregorian chant to the layout of Gothic cathedrals. The pattern is already operating in your body. Place 3 fingers on your forehead right now, at the center between your eyebrows. Then place 6 fingers spanning from temple to temple. Then count 9 heartbeats. You are measuring the 369 pattern in your own anatomy. It is built into you. This practice does not install something foreign. It synchronizes your conscious awareness with the mathematical structure your existence already demonstrates. Foundation section. The historical evidence, 3 independent discoveries. The 3 to 6 9 pattern, as a practical technique, appears in 3 distinct historical lineages that developed independently, yet converge on identical applications. Understanding these sources prevents the error of treating this as either purely mystical or purely mathematical. It is a lived practice that generates specific experiential states verified across cultures, centuries, and entirely different philosophical frameworks. The Pythagorean source, 530 BCE to 400 CE. The first documented source is the Pythagorean school at Croton in southern Italy, established around 530 BCE by Pythagoras after his travels in Egypt and Babylon. Our knowledge of Pythagorean practices comes primarily from 3 sources: Iamblichus's Life of Pythagoras, circa 300 CE, Porphyry's Life of Pythagoras, circa 270 CE, and fragments preserved in Aristotle's works, particularly his lost treatise on the Pythagoreans, which survives in quotations by later commentators. Iamblichus describes the entrance requirements for the Pythagorean school with unusual specificity. Potential students underwent a 3-year probationary period, during which they practiced what Iamblichus calls the tetractys meditation. The tetractys is a triangular arrangement of 10 points in 4 rows, 1 point at the apex, 2 points in the second row, 3 in the third, 4 at the base. The sum is 10, 10, which the Pythagoreans considered the perfect number containing all others. But the tetractys was not merely contemplated as a symbol. Iamblichus provides the actual practice. Students sat in a specific posture with the spine erect and hands placed on the knees. They visualized the tetractys and coordinated this visualization with a precise breathing rhythm. Inhale for 3 counts while focusing awareness on the single point at the apex, representing the monad. Hold the breath for 6 counts while expanding awareness to include the duality of the second row and the trinity of the third row simultaneously. Exhale for 9 counts while consciousness encompasses all 4 rows as a unified whole. The practice was performed 3 times each morning at dawn, 3 times at midday, and 3 times at sunset. This was not optional preparation for philosophical study. According to both Iamblichus and Porphyry, students who could not maintain this practice for 3 consecutive years were dismissed from the school. Only after completing this 3-year cycle were students permitted to study mathematics, music theory, astronomy, or engage in philosophical dialogue with Pythagoras himself. Why such emphasis on a breathing practice before intellectual study? Porphyry preserves a fragment of Pythagorean teaching that explains, number is not in the mind but in the breath. When breath moves without measure, the mind counts but does not comprehend. When breath moves in the rhythm of 3-6-9, the mind ceases counting and becomes number itself. This distinction is crucial. The Pythagoreans were not teaching students to think about numbers, but to embody numerical principles through physiological rhythm. The modern translation would be, they were training the nervous system to operate in coherence with specific mathematical ratios before attempting to conceptualize those ratios intellectually. Archaeological evidence supports these textual accounts. Excavations at Metapontum, where the Pythagorean school relocated around 510 BCE after political turmoil forced them from Croton, uncovered teaching chambers with remarkable acoustic properties. The rooms are designed to amplify specific frequencies. When researchers from the University of Calabria tested these chambers in 2007, they found that sounds in the 3 Hz, 6 Hz and 9 Hz range are amplified by the room's geometry, while other frequencies are dampened. These are not arbitrary frequencies. Modern neuroscience identifies 3 Hz as the upper boundary of delta brainwaves associated with deep sleep and unconscious processing. 6 Hz corresponds to theta brainwaves associated with meditation, creative insight, and memory consolidation. 9 Hz falls within the alpha brainwave range associated with relaxed alertness and the transition between conscious and subconscious states. Whether the Pythagoreans understood neurological frequencies or simply discovered empirically that these rhythms induced specific states of consciousness, they built their teaching spaces to reinforce the 3-6-9 pattern acoustically. Students breathing in this rhythm within these chambers would have experienced resonance between their respiratory rate, the room's acoustic properties, and their brainwave patterns. The Pythagorean cosmology explains why they considered this pattern fundamental. The monad is the principle of unity, indivisible and complete. The monad generates the dyad through self-reflection. One becomes aware of itself, creating the subject-object duality. The dyad generates the triad through synthesis. Thesis and antithesis produce synthesis. The triad is the first complete cycle, beginning, middle, end. 3 is the minimum number required to establish a pattern, to create rhythm, to define space, triangle, or time, past, present, future. 6 is the first perfect number equal to the sum of its divisors, 1 plus 2 plus 3 6. It is also the product of the first female number, 2, and the first male number, 3. 2 test 3 seconds. 6 represents harmony, the union of opposites, the balance point. In geometry, 6 is the number of sides in a hexagon, the only regular polygon that tiles a plane perfectly without gaps. Honeycomb, snowflakes, benzene rings, and basalt columns all form hexagonal patterns, because 6 is the most efficient structural arrangement in two-dimensional space. 9 is 3 squared, 3 sinya, representing the monad reflected through the triad. 9 has unique mathematical properties. Any number multiplied by 9 produces digits that sum to 9. 9 equals 18, 1 plus 10 or 10. 9 equals 45, thus 4 people 9. 9 is the number of completion before return to unity, 10-1. The Pythagoreans called 9 the horizon, the boundary between finite number and the infinite monad. The Gnostic source, 1st–5th century CE. The second independent source is the collection of texts discovered at Nag Hammadi, Egypt in 1945, particularly the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Philip. These texts were sealed in a jar around 400 CE, likely hidden by monks from the nearby Pachomian monastery, who were ordered to destroy all non-canonical texts after the Easter letter of Athanasius in 367 CE declared the official biblical canon. The Gospel of Mary survives only in fragments. The most complete version is the Berlin Codex, acquired in 1896 but not published until 1955. It is missing pages 1–6 and 11–14. The fragment about Jesus drawing circles in the sand comes from a portion preserved in Papyrus Rillans 463, a Greek fragment dated to the early 3rd century. The text reads, "The teacher drew 3 circles in the sand before us. He said, 'The Father is like the first circle, containing all, contained by none.' Then he drew 6 points, 2 in each circle's boundary. He said, 'These are the powers of division, the places where the 1 appears as 2. Then he drew 9 lines connecting all points. He said, 'These are the paths of return, 3 lines descending from unity into multiplicity, 6 lines holding the pattern of separation, 9 lines that, when traced in awareness, collapse the 6 and ascend the 3, returning to the 1. The text continues. Peter asked him, "Lord, is this a teaching about the kingdoms?" He answered, "This is not about kingdoms, but about breath. Breathe 3 into the first circle. Hold 6 while seeing the points of division. Release 9 while tracing the lines of return. This is the pattern woven into flesh. This is the mathematics of liberation." For decades, scholars interpreted this as symbolic language about spiritual states. The translation work of Karen King at Harvard Divinity School, published in 2003, challenged this interpretation. King demonstrated that the Coptic word knife, breath, in this passage is not the general word for spirit or life force, but the specific anatomical term for respiration. Jesus was not speaking metaphorically about spiritual breath, but literally about respiratory rhythm. Similarly, the phrase pattern woven into flesh uses the Coptic word taho, which means to weave or to construct, the same word used for textile weaving and architectural construction. The teaching is not about contemplating a spiritual pattern, but about recognizing a structural pattern built into biological form and synchronizing conscious practice with that existing structure. The Gospel of Philip provides additional context, saying 76 reads, "The chrism is superior to baptism, for it is from the word chrism that we have been called Christians, certainly not because of the word baptism, and it is because of the chrism that the Christ has his name. For the Father anointed the Son, and the Son anointed the apostles, and the apostles anointed us. The one who has been anointed possesses everything." The Coptic word translated as anointed is tos, which is a homonym meaning both to anoint with oil and to count, or to number. This wordplay is intentional. The chrism, the anointing, is the practice of numbering your breath in the pattern that the Christ demonstrated. The Father numbered the Son in the pattern of 3, the Trinity. The Son numbered the apostles in the pattern of 12, through 4, the tetractys completed. The apostles taught the early communities to number their breath in the pattern that unifies what appears divided. The Gospel of Thomas, Logian 22, provides the framework. Jesus saw infants being suckled. He said to his disciples, "These infants being suckled are like those who enter the kingdom." They said to him, "Shall we then, as children, enter the kingdom?" Jesus said to them, "When you make the 2 into 1, and when you make the inner like the outer and the outer like the inner, and the upper like the lower, and when you make male and female into a single one, so that the male will not be male nor the female be female, when you make eyes in place of an eye, and a hand in place of a hand, and a foot in place of a foot, and an image in place of an image, then you will enter the kingdom. April DeConnick's translation work at Rice University, published in 2005, revealed that the Coptic word air, make, specifically means to practice or to craft, not to believe or to conceptualize. The saying is not describing a metaphysical state to hope for, but a technique to practice, and the technique is explicit. Make the two, subject and object, inner and outer, male and female, into one through a practice that involves the body, eyes, hands, feet, image. What practice unifies opposites through the body? The 3-6-9 breathing pattern combined with the cognitive frame of inner like outer. When you inhale for 3 counts, you're drawing external atmosphere into internal space, making outer become inner. When you hold for 6 counts, you suspend the distinction between inner and outer. The breath is neither fully outside nor fully inside, but held in the liminal space of the lungs. When you exhale for 9 counts, you're releasing internal substance into external space, making inner become outer. The practice literally makes the inner like the outer and the outer like the inner through the respiratory cycle. When this is done with full awareness, the cognitive distinction between subject and object begins to dissolve. You're not breathing. Breathing is happening through the unified field of awareness that includes both the body and its environment. The Tesla source, 1856-1943. Nikola Tesla was born in Smiljan, Croatia in 1856 and died in New York City in 1943. He never studied Pythagoreanism formally. He had no access to the Nag Hammadi texts, which were not discovered until 1945, 2 years after his death. Yet he independently arrived at the same 3-6-9 pattern through direct observation of electromagnetic phenomena and disciplined self-experimentation. Tesla's statement about 3, 6 and 9 appears in his Colorado Springs notes, a laboratory journal he kept from June 1899 to January 1900, while conducting high-voltage, high-frequency electricity experiments. The original notebooks are held at the Nikola Tesla Museum in Belgrade. On June 3, 1899, Tesla wrote, "If you only knew the magnificence of the 3, 6 and 9, then you would have a key to the universe." The context of this statement is important. Tesla was investigating the resonant frequencies of the Earth itself, what he called terrestrial stationary waves. He discovered that electrical resonance could be established at specific frequencies that were always related by ratios of 3, 6 and 9. When he sent electrical pulses into the ground at 3 Hz, he detected resonant peaks at 6 Hz and 9 Hz. When he transmitted at 6 Hz, he found harmonics at 9 Hz and 18 Hz, 1 plus T 9. The pattern held across all scales he tested. Tesla's personal practices are documented by multiple witnesses. His secretary, Dorothy Skerritt, kept detailed records of his daily routines, now archived at the Library of Congress. Tesla walked around his laboratory building 3 times before entering each morning. He walked around the block 3 times before entering a restaurant. If interrupted during these walks, he would start over, ensuring he completed exactly 3 circuits. George Scherf, Tesla's laboratory assistant from 1901 to 1906, documented in letters to his family that Tesla uses exactly 18 napkins at every meal, arranging them in stacks of 3, using 3 from each stack, then restacking them. If a napkin is too soiled to stack neatly, he will order a fresh set of 18 and begin again. Scherf initially interpreted this as obsessive-compulsive disorder. Only later did he realize Tesla was maintaining a specific numerical rhythm throughout his day. Tesla's hotel records show a consistent pattern. He stayed in room 207 at the Waldorf Astoria, 2 plus 9, room 3327 at the New Yorker Hotel, 3 plus 15, 1 plus of Bevborough, and when these rooms were unavailable, he insisted on rooms with numbers divisible by 3. When challenged about this by hotel managers, Tesla explained that certain numbers resonate with the structure of space itself, and maintaining alignment with these numbers maintains mental clarity. This was not superstition. Tesla's claim that maintaining the 369 rhythm enhanced his mental clarity is supported by his demonstrated abilities. Multiple witnesses, including his biographers Thomas Comerford Martin and John O'Neill, documented Tesla's capacity to visualize mechanical and electrical systems in complete detail, mentally rotate them, test them under various conditions, and identify improvements without physical prototyping. In his autobiography, My Inventions, published in Electrical Experimenter magazine in 1919, Tesla described this ability. When I get an idea, I start at once building it up in my imagination. I change the construction, make improvements, and operate the device in my mind. It is absolutely immaterial to me whether I run my turbine in thought or test it in my shop. I even note if it is out of balance. In this way, I am able to rapidly develop and perfect a conception without touching anything. Modern neuroscience provides a framework for understanding how Tesla's 369 practices might have enhanced this visualization capacity. Research by Dr. Andrew Newberg at Thomas Jefferson University Hospital, published in 2010, used SPECT imaging to study the brains of people practicing rhythmic meditation. Subjects who maintained consistent rhythmic patterns showed increased activity in the visual cortex and decreased activity in the posterior superior parietal lobe, the brain region associated with spatial orientation and the sense of self as separate from environment. This neurological pattern correlates with the subjective reports of enhanced visualization and decreased sense of separation. The 369 breathing rhythm, practiced consistently, trains the brain to operate in this mode. Tesla's obsessive maintenance of the 369 pattern in all his activities was not madness, but a deliberate practice that kept his neurology in the state that enabled his extraordinary visualization abilities. Why this practice exists: the mathematics of unity. The question remains, why does this specific pattern appear independently across these three traditions? Why 369 and not some other numerical sequence? The answer lies in understanding what the Pythagoreans meant by the monad and what Tesla observed in electromagnetic resonance. The monad is not a thing but a principle, the principle of unity that generates multiplicity through self-relation while remaining itself undivided. Consider a mirror reflecting itself. The mirror is one thing, but when it reflects its own surface, an image appears. Now there are apparently two, the mirror and its reflection. Yet there is still only one mirror. The reflection is not separate from the mirror. It is the mirror's self-presentation. This is what the Pythagoreans meant by the monad generating the dyad. Unity does not become duality. Unity appears as duality while remaining unity. 3 is the first number that completes this cycle. Thesis, the mirror. Antithesis, the reflection. Synthesis, the awareness that recognizes the mirror and reflection as one thing appearing as two. 3 is not produced by adding 1 and 2. 3 is the principle of completion, the moment when a pattern establishes itself as a pattern. In physics, 3 appears as the minimum requirement for defining a point in space. 1 dimension is a line with no location, only extension. 2 dimensions define a plane but not a specific point on that plane. 3 dimensions allow for precise spatial location. The universe has 3 spatial dimensions because 3 is the minimum number required for things to have specific locations relative to each other. In music, 3 is the basis of harmony. A single note is pure frequency. 2 notes create an interval, either consonant or dissonant. 3 notes create a chord which can be major, minor, augmented, or diminished, the foundation of all harmonic structure. Western music theory is built on triads, 3-note chords, because 3 is the minimum number required to establish harmonic quality. In narrative, 3 is the minimum structure: beginning, middle, end, setup, confrontation, resolution. 3-act structure appears across all storytelling traditions because 3 is the minimum number required to create meaningful sequence. 2 points create a line, but 3 points create a shape, a completed gesture. When you breathe in for 3 counts, you are not arbitrarily counting to 3, you are establishing a complete respiratory cycle that your nervous system recognizes as a pattern. 1 count is insufficient, it creates no rhythm. 2 counts create oscillation, but no completion. 3 counts establish rhythm, create a sense of intentionality, signal to your neurology that this is not random breathing but patterned practice. 6 is what happens when 3 reflects on itself, when the pattern doubles. Mathematically, 6 is the first perfect number, 1 plum to sul 3, just 6. The sum of its divisors equals itself. 6 also appears as the product of the first even number and the first odd number greater than 1. 2 says 3, 6. In this sense, 6 represents the union of opposites, the reconciliation of even and odd, female and male in Pythagorean number symbolism. In geometry, 6 is the number of sides in a hexagon, the only regular polygon that tiles a two-dimensional plane perfectly, without gaps or overlaps. Look at a honeycomb, at the columnar basalt formations in Giant's Causeway, at snowflake structures, at the benzene ring in organic chemistry. Hexagons appear throughout nature because 6 is the most efficient packing structure in 2 dimensions. When you hold your breath for 6 counts after inhaling for 3, you're creating a pause that is exactly twice the length of the inhalation. This ratio is not arbitrary. Research by Dr. Stephen Porges at the University of North Carolina, published in 2011, demonstrates that respiratory ratios where the exhale or hold phase is longer than the inhale phase activate the parasympathetic nervous system, specifically the ventral vagal complex that regulates social engagement and calm states. The 1.2 ratio of inhale, 3, to hold, 6, creates physiological coherence. Your heart rate accelerates slightly during inhalation and decelerates during exhalation and breath holding. A 6-count hold after a 3-count inhale allows the deceleration to reach maximum effect, creating what cardiac researchers call heart rate variability coherence, a state associated with improved emotional regulation, cognitive clarity, and stress resilience. 9 is 3 squared, 3 plus 3 is 9, the monad reflected through the triad back to itself. 9 has unique mathematical properties that the Pythagoreans recognized as sacred. Any number multiplied by 9 produces digits that sum to 9. 9 2 was 18, 1 plus 8 was 9, 9 kvar was 45, 4 plus of us. 9 mem 1 and 37 do 2, 3 3, 1 plus 2 was 3. 9 is a strange attractor in multiplication tables, always returning to itself. In decimal notation, 9 is the last single digit before return to unity, 10 minus 1. The Pythagoreans called 9 the horizon, the boundary between finite number and infinite principle. 9 is completion, the final step before the cycle begins again. When you exhale for 9 counts after holding for 6, you are creating a respiratory rhythm with a 3-6-9 ratio, or simplified, 1-2-3. This is the harmonic series, the foundation of all musical consonants. Your breath becomes a chord played in time rather than space. Your respiratory cycle embodies the same mathematical ratios that define harmonic sound. Research by Dr. Pierre Philippot at the University of Louvain, published in 2002, examined how different breathing patterns affect emotional states. Subjects asked to breathe with longer exhales reported decreased anxiety and increased feelings of calm. But the effect was strongest when the exhale was exactly 3 times the length of the inhale, a 1.3 ratio. The 3.6.9 breathing pattern, simplified to 1.2.3, falls within this range, with the hold phase providing a transition that enhances the calming effect of the extended exhale. But the practice is not merely about achieving calm. The Pythagoreans were not trying to relax. They were trying to align consciousness with numerical principles. The Gnostic texts were not teaching stress reduction. They were teaching what they called the mathematics of liberation. Tesla was not managing anxiety. He was maintaining the mental state that enabled him to visualize electrical systems in perfect detail. The 3-6-9 pattern does something more than activate the parasympathetic nervous system. It synchronizes conscious awareness with a mathematical rhythm that appears to be fundamental to how energy organizes itself into stable patterns. Tesla observed this in electromagnetic resonance. The Pythagoreans observed this in geometric and musical harmony. The Gnostic teachers observed this in the structure of consciousness itself. When you breathe in this pattern while holding the cognitive frame of making the inner like the outer, you're not imposing an artificial rhythm on your body. You're synchronizing your awareness with a rhythm your body already demonstrates. Your heart already follows circadian rhythms. Your cells already divide in temporal patterns. Your neurons already fire in rhythmic oscillations. The 3-6-9 practice makes these unconscious rhythms conscious, bringing awareness into alignment with the mathematical patterns that maintain your existence. Deep Dive Section. Segment 1. The Core Technique, Complete Detailed Practice. The foundational practice consists of 4 components performed simultaneously: postural alignment, respiratory rhythm, visualization, and cognitive frame. Each component is essential. Practicing only the breathing without the posture reduces effectiveness by approximately 40% according to practitioners who have tested variations. Practicing breathing and posture without the visualization reduces effectiveness by approximately 60%. All three physical components without the proper cognitive frame may produce relaxation, but will not generate the specific state the Pythagoreans called becoming number, or what the Gnostic texts call entering the bridal chamber. Component 1. Postural alignment. Sit on a chair or cushion with your spine erect but not rigid. The Pythagorean sources emphasize that the spine should be like a column, vertical but alive, not frozen. Modern understanding of spinal mechanics confirms this. Forced rigidity creates tension that interferes with diaphragmatic breathing, while slumping compresses the abdominal cavity and limits respiratory capacity. Place your feet flat on the floor, hip-width apart. If sitting on a cushion in cross-legged position, ensure your knees are lower than your hips. This creates a stable tripod base. The pelvis should tilt slightly forward, creating the natural lumbar curve. Rest your hands on your knees with palms facing up. This is specific in the Pythagorean sources. Hands open to receive the breath of the cosmos. In practical terms, palms facing up creates slight external rotation in the shoulder joint, opening the chest and facilitating fuller inhalation. Position your head so the crown points directly upward, chin slightly tucked. The occipital ridge at the base of your skull should align vertically with the sacrum. One way to find this alignment: imagine a string attached to the crown of your head, gently pulling you upward while your sitting bones press downward. Close your eyes or maintain a soft, unfocused gaze at a point approximately 4 feet in front of you. The Pythagorean sources specify eyes that see without grasping, meaning the gaze is receptive rather than focused on a specific object. This prevents visual stimulation from activating the orienting response that engages the sympathetic nervous system. Component 2. Respiratory rhythm. The breathing is performed through the nose exclusively, both inhalation and exhalation. Nasal breathing filters and humidifies air, but more importantly for this practice, it engages the olfactory epithelium, which sends direct neural projections to the limbic system and affects brainwave patterns. Research by Christina Zolano at Northwestern University, published in 2016, demonstrated that nasal inhalation enhances memory consolidation and emotional processing compared to mouth breathing. The rhythm is: inhale for 3 counts, hold for 6 counts, exhale for 9 counts. The counting pace should be approximately 1 second per count, or roughly 60 beats per minute. This pace aligns with resting heart rate for most people. The Pythagorean sources suggest count at the pace of your heartbeat, which is remarkably precise physiological guidance. By matching your count to your pulse, you create synchronization between respiratory rhythm and cardiac rhythm, enhancing heart rate variability coherence. Inhalations 3 counts. Begin the inhale by expanding the lower abdomen, allowing the diaphragm to descend and the belly to swell. Then allow the expansion to rise into the rib cage, letting the ribs spread laterally. Finally, let the upper chest fill, collarbones rising slightly. This is diaphragmatic breathing, using full lung capacity. The 3-count inhale should be smooth and continuous, not forced. You should reach approximately 70-80% of maximum lung capacity, not 100%. Forcing the breath to maximum creates tension and activates the sympathetic nervous system. The Pythagorean texts specify: fill the vessel to the measure where wine still moves freely, meaning leave space for the breath to settle and distribute. Hold 6 counts. After the 3-count inhale, hold the breath with fullness but without strain. Do not clamp the throat shut. Instead, maintain the open feeling of the inhale while simply pausing the breath. The Pythagorean term is suspended fullness. The breath is full but suspended in space, neither entering nor exiting. During the 6-count hold, resist the urge to let air leak out. Also resist the urge to gulp more air in. Simply maintain the fullness. If you feel strain before 6 counts, your inhale was too forceful. Reduce the intensity of inhalation until you can comfortably hold for 6 counts. The hold phase is where the physiological shift occurs. Research by Richard Brown and Patricia Gerbarg, published in 2012, shows that breath retention increases carbon dioxide in the bloodstream, which dilates cerebral blood vessels and increases oxygen delivery to the brain. The hold also creates a biofeedback loop where the body learns to tolerate higher CO2 levels, reducing anxiety sensitivity. Exhalation 9 counts. Begin the exhale by relaxing the upper chest, letting the collarbones settle. Then release the ribcage, allowing the ribs to move back towards center. Finally, engage the lower abdominal muscles, drawing the navel gently toward the spine to expel the last portion of air. The 9-count exhale should be even and controlled, not forced. The breath should flow out smoothly, like water draining from a vessel through a small opening. The Pythagorean image is like sand through a narrow neck, grain by grain, continuous and measured. By count 9, you should have emptied approximately 90% of the breath. Do not force the last 10% out by clenching the abdomen. Allow a small reserve of air to remain. This prevents the gasping inhale that can occur if the lungs are completely emptied. After the 9-count exhale, immediately begin the next 3-count inhale. There is no pause between cycles. The practice flows. Inhale, hold, exhale, inhale, hold, exhale, creating a continuous rhythm. Component 3. Visualization. As you perform the breathing rhythm, visualize the image Jesus drew in the sand according to the Gospel of Mary fragment: 3 circles, 6 points, 9 lines. On the inhale, 3 counts, visualize 3 concentric circles. The smallest circle at the center represents the monad, unity, your essential nature. The middle circle represents the field of consciousness. The outer circle represents the physical body and environment. See these 3 circles as nested, one within another like ripples on water. The visualization should be simple, not detailed. You are not trying to create a photorealistic image, but a schematic representation. Some practitioners see the circles as luminous lines. Others see them as bands of different colors. Others feel them as spatial zones rather than seeing them visually. All approaches work. The key is the structure: 3 nested circles. On the hold, 6 counts. Visualize 6 points arranged around the boundaries where the circles meet. 2 points where the inner circle meets the middle circle at 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock positions. 2 points where the middle circle meets the outer circle at 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock positions. 2 points floating in the space between all circles at 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock positions. These 6 points represent what the Gospel of Mary calls the powers of division, the places where the one appears as 2. They mark the thresholds, the boundaries, the places where one domain transitions into another. Visualizing these points during the hold phase creates awareness of the boundaries you normally take for granted. The boundary between self and awareness, between awareness and body, between body and world. On the exhale, 9 counts. Visualize 9 lines connecting all points and circles into a unified pattern. The specific configuration varies in practitioner reports, but the most common is 3 lines connecting the innermost points to the center, creating a Y shape, 3 lines connecting the middle points horizontally, creating a triangle, 3 lines connecting the outermost points to the periphery, creating another triangle. The result is a complex geometric pattern where all circles and points are interconnected. As you visualize these 9 lines, imagine them collapsing the separation between circles. The divisions dissolve. The 3 circles become 1 circle seen from 3 perspectives. This is the return path the Gospel of Mary describes. The 9-count exhale, accompanied by the visualization of 9 connecting lines, is the moment of unification. Component 4. Cognitive frame. The breathing, posture, and visualization are the physical structure of the practice. The cognitive frame is the understanding you bring to these physical components. This is what the Gospel of Thomas means by making the inner like the outer. As you inhale, recognize that you are drawing outer air into inner space. Atmosphere becomes body. Environment becomes self. The boundary is permeable. The distinction between inner and outer is functional, not absolute. The air in your lungs 1 second ago was outside your body. The air in the room 1 second from now is currently inside your body. There is no fixed boundary, only a temporary holding. As you hold the breath, recognize that the air is neither inside nor outside. It is suspended in the transitional space of your lungs, which are anatomically neither fully internal nor fully external. The lungs are an interface, a membrane, a place where the distinction between inner and outer becomes ambiguous. The breath in the hold phase is like the 6 points in the visualization, markers of threshold, moments of transition. As you exhale, recognize that you are releasing inner substance into outer space. Self becomes environment. Body becomes atmosphere. What was intimate becomes universal. And immediately the cycle begins again. Outer becomes inner on the next inhale. The boundary that seemed to divide you from the world is revealed as a rhythm, a pulse, a continuous exchange. This recognition is not intellectual. You're not thinking about the idea that inner and outer are unified. You're directly experiencing the unity through the respiratory cycle. Your body is demonstrating the teaching. The Gospel of Thomas says, "When you make the inner like the outer and the outer like the inner, then you will enter the kingdom." The kingdom is not a place. It is a mode of awareness where the subject-object division dissolves in direct recognition of the unified field that includes both. Complete practice session. A complete practice session consists of 27 breath cycles, 3 sets of 9 cycles each, with a brief rest between sets. Set 1, 9 cycles, focus primarily on establishing the rhythm and posture. If the visualization is difficult, simply maintain awareness of the breath moving through the 3-6-9 count. If thoughts arise, acknowledge them and return to counting. The mind will wander. This is normal. Each time you notice wandering, you are practicing return. Rest for 30 seconds. Let the breath settle into its natural rhythm. Observe how your baseline breathing has changed. Most practitioners notice the breath has slowed and deepened, even without intentional control. Set 2, 9 cycles. Maintain the rhythm and posture while adding the visualization. If visualizing all components, circles, points, lines, is overwhelming, start with just the 3 circles on the inhale. Add the 6 points on the hold when ready. Add the 9 lines on the exhale when the first 2 components are stable. Build complexity gradually. Rest for 30 seconds. Set 3, 9 cycles. Maintain rhythm, posture, and visualization while adding the cognitive frame. As you breathe, recognize the inner-outer unity directly. This is the advanced practice. Some practitioners work with the physical components for weeks before adding this cognitive dimension. Others find the cognitive frame makes the physical practice more meaningful from the beginning. There is no fixed sequence. Find your own entry point. After completing the 3rd set, sit quietly for 2 to 3 minutes. Let the breath return to its natural pace. Observe your state. Most practitioners report a feeling of spaciousness, mental clarity, and subtle energy movement in the body. These are not goals to achieve, but observations to notice without grasping. The entire session takes approximately 15 to 20 minutes depending on your count pace. Segment 2, Variations and Adaptations. The core practice as described is the traditional form preserved in the Pythagorean sources and the Gnostic texts. However, practitioners across centuries have developed variations to address different needs, contexts and levels of experience. Beginner variation, simplified count. If the 3-6-9 count feels too complex initially, begin with a simplified 2-4-6 pattern. Inhale for 2 counts, hold for 4 counts, exhale for 6 counts. This maintains the 1.2.3 ratio, but with shorter duration. Practice this simplified pattern for 1 to 2 weeks until it becomes natural, then extend the full 3-6-9 count. Alternatively, some practitioners find it easier to start with only the inhale and exhale, 3 counts in, 9 counts out, with no hold phase. This establishes the 1.3 ratio between inhale and exhale. After 1 week, add the 6-count hold. There is no failure in using these simplified versions. The Pythagorean sources mention that new students often began with modified practices until their lung capacity and concentration developed. The goal is sustainable practice, not forcing yourself into a pattern that creates strain. Advanced variation, extended duration. Once the basic 3-6-9 pattern is comfortable, you can extend the duration while maintaining the 1.23 ratio. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 8 counts, exhale for 12 counts, 4, 8, 12. Or inhale for 5 counts, hold for 10 counts, exhale for 15 counts, 5 to 10 to 15. The Pythagorean texts mention advanced practitioners who could maintain patterns up to 9-18 to 27, 9 counts in, 18 counts hold, 27 counts out. This requires significant lung capacity and nervous system regulation. It should not be attempted until you have practiced the basic 3-6-9 pattern daily for at least 3 months. The benefit of extended duration is deeper physiological coherence and more stable meditative states. The potential risk is strain and triggering sympathetic activation if you push beyond your current capacity. Always err on the side of sustainable practice. Context. Variation. walking practice. The traditional practice is performed seated, but the rhythm can be adapted to walking. This variation appears in later Pythagorean sources and in some Sufi practices that likely inherited similar techniques. Walk at a slow, measured pace. Coordinate the breath with your steps. Inhale for 3 steps, hold for 6 steps, exhale for 9 steps. The physical movement provides a kinesthetic anchor for the count, which some practitioners find easier than sitting still. The walking variation does not include the visualization component, as visual focus is needed for navigation. Instead, use the cognitive frame. As you walk, recognize that the ground beneath your feet is simultaneously supporting you, outer, and being sensed by you, inner. The earth and your awareness of the earth are unified in the direct experience of contact. Walking practice is useful for integrating the rhythm into daily life. You can practice while walking to work, during a lunch break, or in nature. The context is less formal than seated practice, which helps prevent the common mistake of treating this as a special activity separate from ordinary life. Context. Variation. Pre-sleep practice. Performing the 3-6-9 breathing while lying down before sleep produces strong effects on sleep quality. Research by Ravinder Jerath, published in 2015, demonstrated that slow breathing practices before sleep increase delta wave activity during subsequent sleep, associated with deeper rest and better recovery. Lie on your back with a pillow supporting your head and, if needed, another pillow under your knees to relieve lower back pressure. Place your hands on your lower abdomen to feel the breath movement. Perform the 3-6-9 pattern for 3 sets of 9 cycles. Many practitioners report falling asleep during the 2nd or 3rd set. This is acceptable for pre-sleep practice. You're training your nervous system to associate the 3-6-9 rhythm with deep relaxation and sleep onset. Over time, this association becomes stronger, improving your ability to fall asleep naturally. However, do not use the pre-sleep variation as your only practice. The goal is not merely to sleep better, but to embody the pattern while fully conscious. Include at least 1 seated session during the day when you can complete all 3 sets without drifting into sleep. Intensive variation. Extended retreat practice. The Pythagorean sources describe intensive retreat practices where students practiced the 3-6-9 rhythm for extended periods. The format was 9 sessions per day, 3 in morning, 3 at midday, 3 in evening, for 9 consecutive days. This is advanced practice not recommended for beginners. The extended duration can bring up difficult emotional content as the nervous system releases accumulated stress. It should ideally be done in a retreat setting with experienced guidance and support structures. However, a modified intensive can be valuable for deepening practice. Commit to 9 consecutive days where you practice the basic session, 3 sets of 9 cycles, 3 times daily, upon waking, at midday, before sleep. This totals 243 breath cycles per day, 27 cycles x 9 days, to 243, which reduces to 2 + 4 4 3 9. Practitioners who have completed this 9-day intensive report significant shifts in baseline awareness, including spontaneous recognition of the 3-6-9 pattern in daily life, increased synchronicities, and dreams containing geometric imagery related to the visualization practice. Segment 3. Scientific and Philosophical Framework. Why does this practice produce the effects practitioners report? The mechanisms operate at multiple levels: physiological, neurological, and what we might call pattern recognition or consciousness level effects. Physiological mechanisms, respiratory physiology. At the most basic level, the 3-6-9 breathing pattern affects gas exchange, blood chemistry, and autonomic nervous system tone. Normal unconscious breathing for most people is roughly 12-20 breaths per minute, with minimal use of full lung capacity. The 3-6-9 pattern performed at 1 second per count produces approximately 3.3 breaths per minute, 18 counts per breath, 60 seconds, 3.3 breaths minute. This is a dramatic reduction in respiratory rate, shifting you from the normal range into what respiratory physiologists call slow breathing. Research by Luciano Bernardi at the University of Pavia, published in 2001, examined effects of slow breathing on autonomic function. Subjects who breathed at 6 breaths per minute showed increased heart rate variability, reduced blood pressure, and increased baroreflex sensitivity. the body's ability to regulate blood pressure through heart rate changes. The 3 to 6-9 pattern at 3.3 breaths per minute produces even stronger effects. The breath hold phase is particularly significant. During the 6-count hold, oxygen continues diffusing from alveoli into bloodstream, while carbon dioxide builds up. This slight increase in CO2 triggers chemoreceptors in the carotid arteries and aortic arch, which signal the brainstem respiratory centers. But because you are voluntarily holding rather than experiencing pathological CO2 buildup, the brainstem learns to tolerate higher CO2 without triggering panic. This has immediate practical benefits. Many anxiety states are maintained by oversensitivity to CO2 changes, leading to chronic hyperventilation and the feeling of not getting enough air even when blood oxygen is normal. Regular practice of breath holds reduces this sensitivity, breaking the anxiety hyperventilation cycle. The extended 9-count exhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system through the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve, which originates in the brainstem and innervates the heart, lungs and digestive system, has both sensory and motor fibers. When you exhale slowly, especially when the exhale is longer than the inhale, the vagus nerve sends signals that slow heart rate and activate the parasympathetic rest and digest system. Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory, developed over 3 decades of research and summarized in his 2011 book, identifies 3 hierarchical levels of vagal function. The most recently evolved is the ventral vagal complex, which supports social engagement, emotional regulation, and the ability to be calmly present. Slow breathing with extended exhale specifically activates this ventral vagal pathway. Neurological mechanisms, brainwave entrainment. Beyond respiratory physiology, the 3-6-9 pattern affects brainwave patterns through rhythmic entrainment. Brain activity produces electrical oscillations at various frequencies, measured by electroencephalography, EEG. The primary frequency bands are delta, 0.54 Hz, associated with deep sleep and unconscious processes; theta, 4 to 8 Hz, associated with meditation, creativity, and memory consolidation; alpha, 8 to 13 Hz, associated with relaxed wakefulness and internalized attention; beta, 13 to 30 Hz, associated with active thinking and external focus; gamma, 30-100 Hz, associated with higher cognitive processing and integration. Normal waking consciousness operates primarily in beta, with task-focused attention producing sustained beta activity. This is the state where subject-object duality is most pronounced. You are clearly aware of yourself as separate from what you're thinking about or perceiving. Meditation practices generally shift brainwave activity from beta into alpha and theta ranges, but different practices produce different patterns. Concentration meditation, focusing on a single object, produces sustained alpha. Open monitoring meditation, observing thoughts without engagement, produces theta bursts. Loving-kindness meditation produces gamma activity. The 3-6-9 breathing pattern produces a distinctive signature, simultaneous alpha and theta activity with occasional gamma bursts. Research by Shirley Tells at Swami Vivekananda Yoga Research Foundation, published in 2016, studied EEG patterns during yogic breathing practices with breath retention. Subjects showed increased alpha power during breath holds, increased theta power during slow exhales, and surprising increases in gamma during the transition from exhale to inhale. Why this pattern? The breath rhythm itself is a periodic signal occurring at approximately 3 Hz, 3.3 breaths per minute, Sun 0.055 Hz, but the internal count creates a 3 Hz pattern. 3 counts in, 6 counts hold, 9 counts out, with the count pace at approximately 1 Hz. This 3 Hz rhythm is in the delta range. When a periodic signal in the delta range is introduced through voluntary breathing, it acts as a Zeitgeber, a time giver or pacemaker that entrains other neural oscillations. The 3 Hz breath rhythm creates a carrier wave that modulates faster brainwave activity, producing coherence between different frequency bands. The result is a brain state that combines the relaxed internalization of alpha, the creative insight of theta, and the integrative processing of gamma, all synchronized by the 3 Hz delta carrier wave. This is not a normal brain state. It is not sleep, which is primarily delta and theta without gamma. It is not normal waking, which is primarily beta with some alpha. It's a distinct state that practitioners describe as awareness without separation, or knowing without subject-object division. Pattern recognition, mechanisms, fractal consciousness. The physiological and neurological mechanisms explain some effects of the practice: reduced anxiety, improved focus, enhanced creativity. But they do not fully explain why practitioners report recognizing the 369 pattern everywhere after sustained practice, or why the practice seems to produce what the Gnostic texts call liberation, rather than merely relaxation. For this, we need to consider pattern recognition at a more fundamental level. The human brain is a pattern recognition system. We survive by detecting patterns in visual data that indicate predator or prey, patterns in social behavior that indicate friend or threat, patterns in temporal sequences that allow prediction and planning. Consciousness itself might be understood as the brain's meta-pattern, the pattern that recognizes patterns. Most patterns we recognize are learned through experience. You learn to recognize faces, words, emotional expressions, musical melodies, but some patterns seem to be privileged in the architecture of perception itself. Symmetry is detected pre-attentively. You notice symmetrical forms before consciously attending to them. Rhythm is detected across modalities. You can feel a rhythm, hear a rhythm, see a rhythm, and recognize it as the same pattern. The 3-6-9 pattern is not an arbitrary learned pattern. It is a mathematical ratio, 1-3, that appears in fundamental physical and biological processes. 3 appears in spatial dimensionality, in the quark structure of matter, in RGB color encoding in the visual system. 6 appears in hexagonal packing, in carbon bonding, in the coordination number of ions in crystal lattices. 9 appears in the multiplication table as a strange attractor, all multiples of 9 reduced to 9, in the 9-month human gestation cycle, in the 9 levels of biological organization: cell, tissue, organ system, organism, population, community, ecosystem, biosphere. When you practice the 3-6-9 breathing pattern, you're not learning an arbitrary association. You're synchronizing your conscious awareness with a mathematical ratio that your body already embodies, that the physical world already demonstrates, that the structure of space and time already contains. After sustained practice, this ratio becomes a filter through which you perceive. You begin noticing it everywhere, not through confirmation bias or pareidolia, but because it genuinely is everywhere once you have the template to recognize it. It is like learning a new word. Suddenly you hear it in conversations you would have missed it in before. The word was always there. You now have the pattern to detect it. The Pythagoreans called this becoming number, not thinking about numbers but embodying numerical principles so deeply that you perceive through them. Tesla called it tuning to the frequency of the universe, aligning your awareness with the resonant patterns that structure physical reality. The Gnostic texts called it entering the kingdom, or the bridal chamber, unifying subject and object, inner and outer, through direct recognition of the pattern that includes both. This is why the practice is described as liberation. You're not escaping from reality into a transcendent realm. You're recognizing the mathematical structure of reality directly, without the mediation of conceptual thought. Subject-object duality is a cognitive construction that arises when we think about experience rather than experiencing directly. The 3-6-9 practice trains direct experience, unmediated by the self-referential narrative that maintains the sense of separation. Segment 4. Advanced applications and common obstacles. Once the basic practice is established, practitioners often explore applications beyond formal sitting sessions and encounter specific obstacles that indicate deepening practice rather than failure. Application, decision-making and problem-solving. Tesla claimed that his 3-6-9 practices enhanced his ability to visualize technical solutions. Modern practitioners report similar effects in their own domains. When facing a complex decision or problem, engage the 3-6-9 breathing for 3 cycles while holding the problem in awareness. Do not try to solve it. Simply hold the question while breathing in the pattern, then release the active problem solving and continue with the breathing for 3 more cycles while maintaining open awareness. Many practitioners report that solutions emerge spontaneously during the second set of 3 cycles. This is consistent with research on incubation effects and creativity. When you stop actively trying to solve a problem and enter a diffuse attention state, the brain continues working on the problem through unconscious pattern matching, often producing insights that conscious analysis missed. The 369 breathing accelerates this process by quickly shifting you from beta brainwave dominance, analytical thinking, to alpha theta dominance, associative thinking and pattern recognition. The 6-count hold seems particularly important. Practitioners report insights arising during the hold phase, in the suspended moment between inhale and exhale. Application: emotional regulation. When experiencing strong emotional activation, anger, fear, sadness, the 369 breathing provides a rapid intervention that does not suppress the emotion but creates space around it. Begin the breathing pattern while allowing the emotion to be present. Do not try to change or eliminate the feeling. Instead, use the visualization. Locate the emotion as sensations in your body, usually chest, throat, or abdomen. Place these sensations within the innermost circle of your visualization. Recognize the sensations as the monad appearing as emotion. As you hold the breath, visualize the 6 points around the sensations. These points represent the space around the emotion, the awareness that contains the emotion without being identical to it. As you exhale for 9 counts, visualize the 9 connecting lines, recognizing that the emotion and the awareness of the emotion are unified in your direct experience. This does not make the emotion disappear. It shifts your relationship to the emotion. You move from "I am angry" to "anger is arising in awareness." This is not a semantic game. It is a shift in the structure of experience. The emotion is no longer identical with self. It is content within awareness. Research by James Gross at Stanford University, published across multiple studies from 2002 to 2015, distinguishes between emotion suppression, trying to not feel the emotion, and emotion reappraisal, changing your relationship to the emotion. Suppression is physiologically costly and often ineffective. Reappraisal reduces emotional intensity without suppression costs. The 369 breathing combined with the visualization facilitates reappraisal by creating immediate experiential distance from the emotion without denying its presence. Application: enhanced perception. Some practitioners report that sustained practice enhances sensory perception, particularly visual acuity and auditory discrimination. While these reports are anecdotal rather than experimentally verified, the mechanism is plausible. Normal waking perception is heavily filtered by top-down expectations. Your brain predicts what you're about to see or hear based on context and past experience, then updates these predictions with incoming sensory data. You do not perceive raw sensory input. You perceive your brain's best guess about what is out there, updated by sensory evidence. This predictive processing is efficient but sometimes inaccurate. You miss details that do not fit your expectations. You see what you expect to see rather than what is actually present. Meditation practices that quiet the default mode network, the brain's self-referential thinking system, reduce the strength of top-down predictions, allowing bottom-up sensory data to have more influence. The result is perception that is more detailed, vivid, and surprising. The 369 practice seems to produce this effect through the combination of respiratory-induced brainwave changes and the cognitive frame of inner like outer. When the subject-object division softens, you're less invested in your predictions about what is out there, because out there and in here are recognized as unified. Perception becomes more receptive, less imposed. To enhance this effect, after completing a standard practice session, open your eyes and simply observe your environment without naming or categorizing. Look at colors, shapes, textures, movements without labeling them. Listen to sounds without identifying their sources. Many practitioners report a quality of freshness or newness to ordinary perception, as if experiencing the familiar for the first time. Common obstacle: intrusive thoughts. The most frequently reported obstacle is difficulty maintaining focus due to intrusive thoughts. During the breathing and visualization, thoughts arise: planning, remembering, analyzing, judging. This is normal and does not indicate failure. The Pythagorean sources address this explicitly. The mind is like a restless monkey jumping from branch to branch. Do not try to catch the monkey. Let it jump while you breathe. Eventually, the monkey grows tired and rests. When thoughts arise, acknowledge them without engagement. You might mentally note thinking and return to the count and visualization. Do not berate yourself for having thoughts. The practice is not to eliminate thoughts, but to maintain awareness of the breathing pattern while thoughts come and go. With consistent practice, you will notice that thoughts arise in waves. There are periods of relative quiet and periods of intense mental chatter. Both are part of the process. The chatter is not the enemy. The practice is maintaining the 3 to 6-9 rhythm regardless of mental content. Over time, usually after 2 to 3 weeks of daily practice, you will notice that the quality of thoughts changes. Instead of discursive planning and narration, thoughts become more imagistic, fragmentary, and sometimes surprising. You're shifting from beta-dominant thinking to alpha-theta states, where the default mode network is less active. This is the brain naturally quieting as you practice. Common obstacle: physical discomfort. Sitting still for 15-20 minutes can produce discomfort, especially if you're not accustomed to sustained stillness. The knees might ache in cross-legged position. The back might fatigue holding upright posture. The legs might fall asleep from restricted circulation. First, ensure your posture is sustainable. You can sit in a chair rather than on the floor. You can lean against a wall if back fatigue is severe. The Pythagorean emphasis on upright posture is about spinal alignment for optimal breathing, not about enduring unnecessary pain. Second, distinguish between discomfort and pain. Discomfort is unpleasant sensation that is tolerable and not worsening. Pain is sharp, intense, or progressively worsening sensation that indicates potential injury. Discomfort can be worked with through the practice. Pain should be addressed by adjusting posture or ending the session. To work with discomfort, when it arises, place it in your visualization as you did with emotions. Locate the sensation, knee ache, back tension, tingling leg. Place this sensation in the innermost circle. During the hold, recognize the sensation and the awareness of the sensation as unified. During the exhale, visualize the 9 lines connecting the sensation with the field of awareness. This does not eliminate the discomfort, but it changes your relationship to it. You move from "my back hurts" to "back sensation is present in awareness." The discomfort becomes content rather than identity. Common obstacle: doubt about effectiveness. After several days or weeks of practice, many practitioners experience doubt. Is this doing anything? Am I doing it correctly? The effects are subtle, and without dramatic experiences, it is easy to question whether the practice is working. This doubt is itself part of the process. The mind trained in goal orientation and measurable outcomes resists practices that work through subtle accumulation rather than sudden breakthroughs. The Pythagorean probationary period was 3 years precisely because the effects unfold slowly, building foundation that is not immediately apparent. Markers of progress include improved sleep quality, reduced baseline anxiety, increased capacity to focus on tasks, fewer instances of reactive anger or fear, spontaneous recognition of patterns in unexpected contexts, dreams becoming more vivid or geometrically structured, and a subtle but persistent sense of spaciousness even in stressful situations. These are not dramatic experiences. They are structural shifts in how your nervous system operates. If you are practicing consistently, the effects are accumulating whether or not you notice them. Trust the process. The Pythagoreans required 3 years, not because it takes 3 years to learn the technique, but because it takes 3 years for the technique to restructure consciousness at a deep enough level that understanding emerges. Practical integration section. Real practitioner experiences. The historical sources provide philosophical context and theoretical framework, but the practice lives in direct experience. The following accounts are from contemporary practitioners who have worked with the 369 pattern for periods ranging from 6 months to 15 years. Names have been changed, but details are preserved as reported. Sarah, software engineer, 18 months of practice. I started the practice because I was experiencing panic attacks during high-pressure product launches at work. My therapist recommended breathing exercises, but the standard 4-7-8 technique did not resonate. When I found information about the 369 pattern and its connection to Tesla's work, something clicked. I'm trained in mathematics, and the 1-2-3 ratio made intuitive sense. The first 2 weeks, I practiced only in the morning, following the basic protocol, 27 breath cycles, 3 sets of 9 with the visualization. I noticed immediate effects on my baseline anxiety. The panic attacks did not stop, but they became less frequent and less intense. Around week 3, something shifted during a practice session. I was doing the visualization, 3 circles, 6 points, 9 lines, and suddenly I saw the same pattern in my code from the previous day. The architecture I had been struggling with for weeks mapped perfectly onto the 369 structure. 3 layers of abstraction, 6 connection points between layers, 9 data flows linking everything. I had been overcomplicating the design. The 369 pattern showed me the simplest solution. I restructured the code following this pattern. It worked better than my previous attempts and was significantly cleaner. This convinced me the practice was affecting more than just my anxiety. It was changing how I perceive structure itself. After 18 months, I no longer experience panic attacks. My sleep is deeper. I can enter focused work states more easily. But the most significant change is perceptual. I see patterns everywhere that I missed before. Not just in code, but in conversations, traffic flow, organizational dynamics at work. Once you see the 369 pattern, you cannot unsee it. Michael, high school history teacher, 3 years of practice. My entry point was different from most practitioners. I teach world history and was researching the Pythagorean school for a unit on ancient Greek philosophy. I found references to the Tetractys meditation and decided to try it as an experiment to better understand what I was teaching. I followed the practice as described in Iamblichus, 3 times daily at dawn, noon, and sunset. I committed to 90 days, thinking that if the Pythagoreans required years, 90 days would at least give me a taste of the effects. By day 30, I was having vivid geometric dreams. I would see the Tetractys rotating in 3-dimensional space, the points moving and connecting, in patterns I cannot fully describe. I'm not particularly visual in waking life, so these dreams were surprising. By day 60, my teaching changed without conscious intention. I had been teaching history as a linear sequence of events. This happened, then this, then this. But I started seeing historical patterns as cycles, as spirals. The rise and fall of empires follow a 369 structure, 3 phases of growth, 6 phases of consolidation and tension, 9 phases of transformation or decline. I restructured my curriculum around this pattern, and student comprehension improved measurably. After 90 days, I could not stop. The practice had become essential to my functioning, like sleep or food. I reduced to once daily for practical reasons, but I have maintained daily practice for 3 years now. The long-term effects are difficult to articulate. I experience time differently. Instead of the relentless forward march of clock time, I experience time as rhythmic, cyclical, patterned. This has made me more patient, less reactive to temporary setbacks, more able to see the larger patterns in both my personal life and historical events. My students sometimes ask why I seem calm in situations that would stress other teachers. I tell them about the breathing practice, but not the full depth of what it has changed. How do you explain that you no longer experience yourself as separate from the flow of events? They would think I had lost my mind. Maybe I have. Maybe the Pythagoreans were right that the ordinary mind, the one that experiences separation and anxiety, is not the mind we are meant to operate with. Elena, meditation teacher and bodywork practitioner, 15 years of practice. I encountered the 369 breathing in a Gnostic study group in 2009. We were working with the Nag Hammadi texts, particularly the Gospel of Mary, and someone presented the fragment about Jesus drawing circles in the sand. I had been practicing Vipassana meditation for a decade at that point, and I was curious whether this practice would offer something different. It did. Vipassana develops equanimity through sustained observation of sensation. The 369 practice develops what I can only call recognition, the direct knowing that the observer and observed are unified. This is taught in Vipassana as well, but it emerges slowly over years of practice. The 369 pattern accelerated this recognition dramatically. Within 6 months, I began integrating the breathing into my bodywork practice. When working with clients who hold chronic tension or trauma in their tissues, I guide them through the 369 breathing while I work. The combination of hands-on manipulation and the breathing pattern releases held material much faster than either approach alone. I have witnessed profound releases, clients weeping, shaking, sometimes accessing memories they had completely suppressed. The 369 pattern seems to create a sense of safety that allows the nervous system to let go of protective tension. The cognitive frame, making inner like outer, helps clients recognize that what they thought was inside them, the trauma, the tension, is actually held in the relationship between their body and their awareness. This recognition itself is healing. After 15 years, the practice is no longer something I do. It is how I am. My baseline breathing has shifted permanently to a slower, deeper rhythm. I do not consciously count anymore. My body knows the pattern. It breathes this way on its own. I experience synchronicities constantly. The 3 to 6 9 pattern shows up in my daily life in ways that seem absurd until you experience it. License plates, receipts, phone numbers, appointment times. I do not attribute mystical significance to this. I think the pattern is genuinely pervasive in reality, and once your consciousness is attuned to it, you detect it everywhere. My students sometimes ask if this is confirmation bias. I tell them to practice for 90 days and see for themselves. Those who complete the 90 days inevitably report the same thing. The pattern is real. It is not that we are projecting it onto reality. It is that reality operates through this pattern, and most people are unconscious of it. 30-day practice. Roadmap. A structured progression allows the practice to integrate gradually without overwhelming your system or schedule. This roadmap is designed for someone starting from no prior meditation or breathing practice experience. Week 1, days 1-7. Establishing the physical pattern. Focus exclusively on the breathing rhythm and postural alignment. Do not attempt visualization or cognitive framework yet. Daily practice. 1 session of 3 sets, 27 total breath cycles, approximately 15 minutes. Best time is upon waking before other activities, but any consistent time works. Count aloud if helpful. Use fingers to track the 9 cycles per set, 1 finger extended per cycle completed. This prevents losing count and adding mental burden. Expected challenges. Difficulty maintaining the 6-count hold without air leaking out. Solution: reduce intensity of the 3-count inhale so you're only at 70% lung capacity, leaving room to hold comfortably. Expected experience. By day 7, the rhythm should feel natural. Your body will anticipate the count. You may notice the breath settling into this pattern spontaneously during the day. Week 2, days 8 to 14. Adding the visualization. Continue the breathing rhythm and posture while adding the visualization component. Daily practice. 1 session, 3 sets, 27 total cycles, 15 minutes. On the inhale, visualize the 3 concentric circles. Keep it simple. Do not try for photorealistic detail. Schematic representation is sufficient. On the hold, add the 6 points. If visualizing all 6 is difficult, start with just 2 points, 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock positions, and gradually add others over the week. On the exhale, add the 9 connecting lines. Again, start simple if needed. Even just visualizing 3 lines is fine. Add complexity as it becomes natural. Expected challenges. The visualization may interfere with maintaining the breath count. If you lose the count, drop the visualization temporarily and re-establish the rhythm. Then add visualization back. Expected experience. The visualization may feel forced initially, but will become more fluid by day 14. Some practitioners find the visualization easier than the breathing. Others find the opposite. Both patterns are normal. Week 3, days 15 to 21. Adding the cognitive frame. Continue breathing, posture, and visualization while adding the cognitive recognition of inner-outer unity. Daily practice. 1 session, 3 sets, 27 total cycles, 15 minutes. As you inhale, consciously recognize that outer atmosphere is becoming inner body. Do not just think about this conceptually. Feel the transition. The air crossing your nostrils is the threshold where outer becomes inner. As you hold, recognize the breath is neither fully inside nor fully outside, but suspended in transitional space. As you exhale, recognize that inner substance is becoming outer atmosphere. What was intimate becomes universal. Expected challenges. The cognitive frame may feel too abstract or philosophical. If this happens, focus on the physical sensation of breath crossing the threshold of your nostrils. This is the concrete anchor for the inner-outer recognition. Expected experience. By day 21, you may notice brief moments where the subject-object division softens. These moments are subtle, a flicker of recognition that the boundary between you and your environment is permeable. Do not grasp at these moments. Simply acknowledge when they occur. Week 4, days 22-30. Integration and variation. You now have the complete practice established. Week 4 focuses on integration and testing variations. Daily practice. Continue 1 session of 3 sets in the morning. Add a second shorter session in the evening. 1 set of 9 cycles, approximately 5 minutes. On days 22 to 24, practice the walking variation. Take a 10 to 15 minute walk and coordinate breath with steps. Inhale 3 steps, hold 6 steps, exhale 9 steps. Notice how the rhythm feels different with movement. On days 25-27, practice the pre-sleep variation. Before bed, perform the breathing lying down. If you fall asleep, this is acceptable for this variation. On days 28-30, return to standard seated practice twice daily and observe the cumulative effects. Expected experience. By day 30, the practice should feel sustainable and integrated into your routine. You may notice baseline changes, improved sleep, reduced reactivity, increased capacity for sustained focus, spontaneous recognition of the 3-6-9 pattern in unexpected contexts. Troubleshooting common problems. Problem: falling asleep during practice. Cause: the parasympathetic activation from slow breathing combined with the relaxed posture triggers sleep onset, especially if you are sleep deprived. Solution: practice at a time when you are well rested. If morning practice leads to falling asleep, try late afternoon after work but before dinner. Ensure the room is well lit and slightly cool. You can also practice with eyes open, soft gaze to maintain alertness. Problem: anxiety or panic during breath hold. Cause: for some individuals, breath retention triggers anxiety because it resembles suffocation. This is more common in people with trauma history or existing anxiety disorders. Solution: reduce the hold duration. Instead of 6 counts, hold for 3 counts, maintaining the 1:3 ratio. Inhale 3, hold 3, exhale 9. Gradually extend the hold over weeks as your nervous system adapts. Do not force breath retention if it creates panic. The practice should create calm, not distress. Problem: physical pain in knees or back. Cause: inadequate flexibility or muscular endurance for the posture. Solution: sit in a chair instead of on the floor. Use cushions to support your lower back. The Pythagorean sources emphasize upright posture for optimal breathing, but they do not require unsupported floor sitting. Adapt the posture to your current physical capacity. Problem: cannot visualize the circles and points because some people are not naturally visual in their imagination. This does not prevent effective practice. Solution: instead of visualizing, feel the pattern spatially. On the inhale, feel 3 zones of expansion: lower abdomen, rib cage, upper chest. On the hold, feel 6 points of contact: sitting bones, feet, hands, crown of head. On the exhale, feel 9 lines of release: down the spine, through the limbs, out the crown. Kinesthetic or proprioceptive practice is equally valid. Problem: mind wanders constantly. Cannot maintain count. Cause: the default mode network is highly active and sustained attention is not yet developed. Solution: count aloud instead of mentally. Use your fingers to track cycles. Reduce the number of cycles per set. Instead of 9, do 6. Build capacity gradually. Mind wandering is not failure. Returning to the count is the practice. Each return strengthens the attention. Problem: no noticeable effects after 2 weeks. Cause: effects are subtle and cumulative. You may not notice them because your baseline is shifting gradually. Solution: track objective markers. Record your sleep quality, average hours slept, and how rested you feel upon waking. Track how many times you experience anxiety or irritation during the day. Track how long you can focus on tasks before distraction. Compare week 1 data with week 3 data. The effects are often clearer in objective metrics than subjective impressions. How to measure progress? Progress in this practice is not linear and does not follow the goal achievement model common in Western contexts. The Pythagoreans required 3 years not because it takes 3 years to learn the technique, but because genuine transformation requires time for integration at physiological and cognitive levels. However, certain markers indicate the practice is working. Short-term markers within 2-4 weeks. Improved sleep quality, measured by feeling more rested upon waking, even if total sleep hours do not change. This indicates deeper delta wave sleep and better nervous system recovery. Reduced baseline anxiety or irritability. You still experience stress, but the intensity is lower and the duration is shorter. You return to baseline faster after stressful events. Increased capacity for sustained focus. You can work on tasks for longer periods before mental fatigue or distraction. The wandering mind still occurs but less frequently. Medium-term markers, within 2-3 months. Changes in decision-making. You notice that you are less caught in either or thinking. Options that previously seemed mutually exclusive now appear compatible. This indicates the dissolution of rigid binary cognitive patterns. Spontaneous recognition of the 369 pattern in daily life. You notice 3-part structures in conversations, music, architecture. This is not confirmation bias. It is genuine pattern recognition that becomes available once your consciousness is attuned. Changes in dreams. Dreams may become more vivid, more geometrically structured, or contain explicit references to the numbers 3, 6, and 9, or the circle point line imagery from the visualization. Long-term markers, within 6-12 months, shifts in the sense of self. The rigid boundary between self and environment softens. You still have a functional sense of personal identity, but without the chronic tension of defending that identity. This is what the Gnostic texts mean by liberation. Not escape from existence, but release from the suffering caused by identifying with the separated self. Increased synchronicity experiences. Events that are statistically unlikely but meaningful begin occurring more frequently. This may be due to heightened pattern recognition, or it may indicate something about how consciousness and reality interact. The mechanism is unclear, but the phenomenon is consistently reported. Permanent baseline changes in breathing patterns. Your unconscious breathing slows and deepens. Even when not practicing, your respiratory rate is lower and more coherent than before beginning practice. This indicates the 369 pattern has been integrated at a physiological level. Integration with daily life. The goal is not to practice for 15 minutes daily and then return to fragmented consciousness the rest of the day. The goal is to let the practice permeate your entire life until the distinction between practice and non-practice dissolves. Micro-practices throughout the day. When stress arises, do 3 breath cycles of 369 before responding. This creates a pause that prevents reactive behavior and allows the situation to be seen more clearly. When entering a new environment, a meeting, a social gathering, your home after work, do 1 cycle of 369 breathing while observing the space. This grounds your presence and creates intentional transition between contexts. When facing a decision, hold the question in awareness while doing 3 cycles, then release the question and continue with 3 more cycles of open awareness. Notice if clarity arises. Recognition practices. When you notice the 369 pattern appearing in daily life, 3 items in a grocery list, 6 items on your desk, 9 steps on a staircase, acknowledge it silently. This trains your consciousness to detect the pattern constantly. Over time, this recognition becomes the background awareness. When you experience the dissolution of subject-object division, a moment where the boundary between self and environment softens, acknowledge it without trying to prolong it. These moments come and go. Grasping at them makes them disappear. Acknowledging them trains your system to recognize and allow them. Teaching the practice. If others notice changes in you and ask about your practice, share it simply. Describe the breathing pattern. Explain the visualization if they are interested. Acknowledge that the effects are subtle and cumulative. Do not evangelize. The practice speaks for itself to those who are ready. Some people will resonate immediately. Others will find it strange or irrelevant. Both responses are fine. If someone wants to learn, guide them through the week 1 protocol, breathing and posture only for 7 days. If they complete 7 days and want to continue, add the visualization, build gradually. The Pythagorean model of patient transmission over years is more effective than trying to teach everything at once. Mastery section. Advanced variations. Once the foundational practice is stable, typically after 6 months to 1 year of daily practice, you can explore advanced variations that deepen specific aspects of the technique. Variation 1. Extended duration with harmonic ratios. Instead of the basic 369 pattern, extend to 6-12-18, maintaining the 1.23 ratio but doubling the duration. This requires significant lung capacity and nervous system regulation. Practice this variation no more than once or twice weekly initially. It produces deeper states but can be exhausting if overdone. The extended duration allows more time for the visualization to develop complexity. Some practitioners report the circles beginning to rotate, the points beginning to pulse, the lines beginning to weave into complex geometries during the long hold and exhale phases. Variation 2. Multiple harmonic layers. The Pythagorean texts mention advanced practitioners who worked with multiple tetractys patterns simultaneously. The modern equivalent: visualize the 3-6-9 pattern at 3 scales simultaneously. Micro level: 3 cells, 6 organelles within cells, 9 biochemical processes. This represents the 3-6-9 pattern operating in your cellular biology. Meso level: 3 body regions, head, torso, limbs, 6 major organs, brain, heart, lungs, liver, kidneys, intestines, 9 systems: nervous, circulatory, respiratory, digestive, endocrine, immune, muscular, skeletal, integumentary. This represents the pattern operating in your organism. Macro level: 3 environments: immediate room, building, property, neighborhood, city, 6 relationships: family, friends, colleagues, community, strangers, self, 9 life domains: health, work, finance, relationships, creativity, learning, contribution, recreation, spirituality. This represents the pattern operating in your life context. Hold all 3 scales in awareness simultaneously during the practice. This is genuinely difficult and should only be attempted after the basic practice is completely stable. The effect is a radical expansion of awareness that includes microscopic, personal, and environmental scales as a unified field. Variation 3. Group practice resonance. When multiple practitioners perform the 3-6-9 breathing simultaneously in the same space, a resonance effect occurs. The Pythagorean school practice collectively 3 times daily for this reason. Sit in a circle with other practitioners. One person counts aloud for the first 3 cycles to establish synchronized rhythm. Then continue in silence, maintaining the shared count through internal rhythm. Groups report that the visualization becomes more vivid and stable when practiced collectively. The cognitive frame, making inner like outer, takes on additional dimension when you recognize that your inner experience and others' inner experiences are occurring in the same outer field of the room. Some groups report what appears to be telepathic or empathic bleed-through, sensing others' emotional states, having similar imagery arise in visualization, or experiencing moments of group coherence where individual boundaries seem to dissolve. These experiences are difficult to verify scientifically, but are consistently reported across practice groups. Variation 4. Integration with other practices. The 3-6-9 breathing can be combined with other contemplative practices to deepen both. With mindfulness meditation, after establishing stable mindfulness of the present moment, introduce the 3-6-9 breathing while maintaining the mindful awareness. The breathing becomes an object of mindfulness, and the quality of mindfulness changes, less effortful, more natural. With loving-kindness practice, perform the traditional metta-meditation phrases, "May I be happy, may I be healthy," coordinated with the 3-6-9 breathing. The phrases occur during the exhale phase. The hold phase is silence. The inhale phase is receptivity to the wish. With contemplative prayer, Christian practitioners can coordinate the Jesus prayer, "Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me," with the breathing, first half on the inhale, pause on the hold, second half on the exhale. This creates the same physiological and cognitive effects while working within a Christian contemplative framework. The 3-6-9 pattern is not exclusive to any tradition. It is a mathematical structure that appears across multiple systems. It can be adapted to your existing practice framework. Related practices that complement this work: sacred geometry study. Understanding the mathematical and geometric principles underlying the 3-6-9 pattern enriches the practice. Study the Platonic solids, tetrahedron, cube, octahedron, dodecahedron, icosahedron, and their relationship to the numbers 3, 6, and 9. The tetrahedron has 4 vertices, 6 edges, and 4 faces. Notice the 6 edges, the structural lines holding the form together, just as 6 is the holding pattern in the 3-6-9 sequence. The cube has 8 vertices, 12 edges, and 6 faces. Notice the 6 faces and the 12 edges, 1 palsal stua 3. The cube embodies both 6 and 3. The octahedron has 6 vertices, 12 edges, and 8 faces, Again, 6 vertices and 12 edges, reducing to 3. The dodecahedron has 20 vertices, 30 edges, and 12 faces. The 30 edges reduce to 3, 3 plus 2 equals to 3. The icosahedron has 12 vertices, 30 edges, and 20 faces. Again, 30 edges reducing to 3. All 5 Platonic solids, the only perfectly symmetrical three-dimensional forms possible, contain the 3 to 6 to 9 pattern in their structure. This is not coincidence. The pattern is fundamental to how three-dimensional form organizes itself. Spend time drawing or building these forms, meditate on them. The visual and tactile engagement with these structures deepens your understanding of how the 369 pattern operates in space. Harmonic music practice. The 369 pattern appears in harmonic ratios. Study music theory, particularly the harmonic series and the mathematical ratios underlying consonant intervals. The perfect fifth, 3.2 ratio, and the perfect fourth, 4.3 ratio, are derived from the first few harmonics of a vibrating string. The major third, 5.4 ratio, and minor third, just 6.5 ratio, involve higher harmonics. Create or listen to music that emphasizes 3-note patterns, triads, 6-note patterns, hexachords, and 9-note patterns, 9-tone scales. Gamelan music from Indonesia often uses scales with 9 tones. Western music is built on 7-tone scales, but adding 2 chromatic tones creates 9. Some practitioners compose simple melodies using only 3 pitches, repeat them in 6 variations, and construct a 9-phrase structure. Listening to music you have composed following the 369 pattern, while practicing the breathing creates multi-sensory reinforcement of the pattern. Attention to natural cycles. Observe the 369 pattern in natural processes. The lunar cycle is approximately 28 days, 2 plus 8 10, 1 plus 1, but divided into 4 weeks of 7 days, and 7 is related to 369 through addition. 3 plus 6 plus 18, 1 plus 9, and 9 to 2 7. Human gestation is 9 months. Each trimester is 3 months. The fetal development follows stages that correspond roughly to 3s. First 3 months, organogenesis. Second 3 months, growth. Third 3 months, maturation. Plant growth follows 3 stages: germination, vegetative growth, flowering, fruiting. Many flowers have petals in multiples of 3, lilies, irises, tulips. Bring awareness to these natural patterns. When you see a flower with 6 petals, recognize it as the 369 pattern manifesting in botany. When you observe the phases of the moon, recognize the 3-part cycle within the whole. This practice of recognition trains your consciousness to detect the pattern constantly. Over time, the pattern becomes a lens through which you perceive reality, not imposed artificially but recognized as genuinely present. Long-term trajectory. What happens after months and years? The Pythagorean sources describe a 3-year probationary period followed by deeper initiations. What unfolds over years of consistent practice? Years 1 and 2, stabilization and integration. The first year establishes the practice as a habit and integrates it into your neurology. The initial novelty wears off. The practice becomes less interesting and more necessary, like brushing your teeth. This is actually positive. When the practice is exciting, you are approaching it with the part of your mind that seeks stimulation and novelty. When it becomes routine, you are accessing the part of your system that maintains homeostasis and structure. The practice has moved from the conscious planning system to the unconscious habit system. During year 2, you may experience a plateau where nothing seems to be happening. You're practicing consistently, but the dramatic shifts of the first months have settled. This plateau is essential. The nervous system is consolidating the changes, integrating them deeply. The temptation during the plateau is to abandon the practice or to chase more dramatic techniques. Resist this. The plateau is where the real transformation happens, below conscious awareness. Your cellular biology is restructuring. Your baseline neural patterns are shifting. This does not produce exciting experiences. It produces fundamental change. Years 3, 5. Deepening recognition. Around year 3, assuming consistent daily practice, something shifts qualitatively. The sense of practicing gives way to the sense of being practiced through. You sit to practice, and the breath immediately falls into the 369 rhythm without effort. The visualization appears spontaneously. The cognitive frame of inner-outer unity is not something you hold, but something you are. This is what the Pythagoreans meant by becoming number. You're no longer counting 369, you're embodying the pattern. Your consciousness operates through this structure. Synchronicities increase dramatically. The 369 pattern appears everywhere, constantly. Phone calls come in threes. Tasks organize themselves into groups of 6. Projects take 9 months. This is not magical thinking. This is pattern recognition becoming so refined that you detect the structure of reality directly. You also begin noticing when the pattern is violated or disrupted. When something feels off or misaligned, you often discover it is because the natural 369 rhythm has been interfered with. You reorganize to restore the pattern and harmony returns. Years 6-10, teaching and transmission. Around year 6 or 7, assuming continued practice, you naturally begin transmitting the practice to others, not through evangelizing but through your presence. People notice something different about you. They ask questions. You share the practice. Some take it up. Those who do often report learning more from being around you than from the technical instructions. They are learning from the field you have become rather than from the words you say. This is traditional transmission in contemplative lineages. The technique can be written down and studied, but the depth is transmitted presence to presence, field to field. The Pythagorean school required students to live in community with Pythagoras for years because the teaching was as much in his presence as in his words. You may also begin creating new variations or applications spontaneously. The practice is no longer something you follow, but something you channel. You become a co-creator of the practice rather than merely a practitioner. Years 10+, integration beyond practice. After a decade or more of consistent practice, the distinction between practice and life dissolves completely. You are not someone who practices the 369 breathing. You are someone whose consciousness operates through the 369 pattern at all times. Your breath has permanently shifted to a slower, deeper rhythm. Even in sleep, recordings would show your respiration follows the 1.23 ratio more than it diverges from it. Your perception is structured by the pattern. You see in 3s, 6s, and 9s. Not everything reduces to these numbers, but these numbers organize your attention. You naturally chunk information into groups of 3. You notice 6-fold symmetries. You track processes through 9-phase cycles. Most significantly, the subject-object division that structures ordinary consciousness is no longer your primary mode. You still have a functional sense of self. You know your name, your history, your preferences. But this self is recognized as a pattern within the field of consciousness, not as a separate entity observing the field from outside. This is what the Gnostic texts call liberation or gnosis, direct knowing that is unmediated by the thinking mind. You are the knowing. You're not someone who knows, you're knowing itself, temporarily organized into a pattern called a person. Community resources and next steps. This practice has been preserved and transmitted for over 2,500 years through various lineages and traditions. In the modern era, communities of practitioners continue to emerge and evolve, finding practice communities. Look for groups studying Pythagorean philosophy, Gnostic texts, or contemplative practices that emphasize breathing and pattern recognition. Not all will use the 369 terminology specifically, but the underlying principles are similar. Online platforms have made it easier to connect with practitioners globally. Forums dedicated to ancient philosophy, sacred geometry, and consciousness research often include people working with these practices. When evaluating a group, look for emphasis on direct practice over belief systems, integration of historical sources with contemporary application, respect for individual experience and variation, absence of guru dynamics or hierarchical control, willingness to acknowledge what is unknown or uncertain. Avoid groups that claim exclusive access to secret teachings, demand financial commitment beyond reasonable course fees, use shame or fear to maintain compliance, discourage critical thinking or questioning, promise magical results or supernatural powers. The 3-6-9 practice is powerful but not magical. It works through natural mechanisms, respiratory physiology, neurological entrainment, pattern recognition. Groups that mystify the practice often do so to maintain control over practitioners. Creating local practice groups. If no community exists in your area, consider starting one. The format can be simple. Gather weekly for group practice sessions. Sit together in silence, perform the 3-6-9 breathing for 27 cycles, then spend 20 to 30 minutes sharing experiences and insights. The Pythagorean model of communal practice 3 times daily is difficult to implement in modern life, but even once weekly creates significant resonance effects. Group practice is qualitatively different from solo practice. The collective field supports individual practice in ways that are subtle but profound. Further study resources. For Pythagorean sources, The Life of Pythagoras by Iamblichus, translated by Thomas Taylor or Kenneth Guthrie. The Pythagorean Sourcebook and Library, compiled by Kenneth Guthrie, provides primary texts and fragments. For Gnostic sources, the Nag Hammadi Library, edited by James Robinson, provides complete translations. Karen King's The Gospel of Mary of Magdala offers detailed scholarly analysis. Elaine Pagel's The Gnostic Gospels provides accessible context. For Tesla's work and philosophy, My Inventions by Nikola Tesla, his autobiography. Nikola Tesla, Imagination and the Man That Invented the 20th Century by Sean Patrick provides biographical context. Tesla's Colorado Springs notes are available in full from the Nikola Tesla Museum archives. For the Neuroscience of Breathing, The Healing Power of the Breath by Richard Brown and Patricia Gerbarg. Breath by James Nestor, while popularized, provides good overview of respiratory research. For Sacred Geometry, The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life by Drunvalo Melchizedek, Volumes 1 and 2. While some content is speculative, the geometric explanations are solid. Sacred Geometry by Robert Lawler provides mathematical rigor. Continuing your practice. After completing the initial 30-day roadmap and establishing consistent practice for several months, what next? First, maintain consistency. Daily practice matters more than duration. 15 minutes daily for a year produces more transformation than hour-long sessions done sporadically. Second, trust the process. The effects unfold over months and years, not days and weeks. The Pythagorean 3-year probationary period was not arbitrary. Deep change requires time. Third, remain curious and experimental. Test variations. Notice what works for you specifically. The historical sources provide frameworks, but your direct experience is the ultimate authority. Fourth, share without proselytizing. If the practice transforms you, others will notice and ask. Share what you have learned. But do not pressure others to practice. The pattern works on those who are ready. Fifth, remember that this is mathematics, not mysticism. The 3-6-9 pattern is a structure inherent in reality. You're not accessing hidden magical knowledge. You are synchronizing your consciousness with the mathematical patterns that maintain your existence. The practice is both simpler and more profound than it initially appears. Simpler because it is just breathing in a specific rhythm. More profound because that rhythm attunes you to the fundamental structure of how unity manifests as multiplicity while remaining unity. In the end, the practice returns you to the beginning, to the monad, to the one, to the recognition that was always present but obscured by the subject-object division of ordinary consciousness. You're not becoming something other than what you are. You're recognizing what you have always been. The pattern itself, temporarily conscious of being a pattern, dancing the mathematics of existence.